me to say one more thing. It does seem to me that we are dealing with the whole topic of what you might call the death of the subject, which to me, and I would love to hear you sort of answer this historical question, which is that can we not talk about this whole discussion as being something that is within our own particular historical time frame, and it is talking about relevant things in our own time frame, and can we not say, for instance, that freedom increases in many ways through material wealth, through the fact that we are less constrained by having to eat each day, and that we have more and more free time. I'm just thinking about the example of the internet, where, for instance, my students can go and do primary research and prove books wrong. In fact, I actually get them to do this. I say, here's a book, and you can go and look it up and do a word search and find out that this particular fact in this book is wrong. And suddenly you realize that the internet has given everybody much more access. It's much more freedom to do, for instance, research, given many more people. And you suddenly think, well, hold on a second, we are much more free than we have been in the past. And isn't this a function of history? And aren't a lot of what we were talking about can be constrained historically? So there's a huge amount of questions for the panel to answer in about 2 minutes.
Well, if I can remember them, I think this gentleman, my short answer is no, I don't need such a guarantee. What was it, remind me? I can't remember the others. Sorry.
Mental illness.
Oh gosh, there is a lot of research being done. I mean, I'm not sort of up on it, but there is a lot of research. I think you will find in any organic disorder, which of course, most mental illnesses always has at least some kind of physical dysfunction correlated with it, even if one can say the immediate causes aren't physical. They are all the result of genetic factors and environmental factors working together and interacting and resulting in whatever occurs, and this will be the same as anything else, but I'm not sure, I'm not aware at the moment of what precisely those factors are, I'm afraid. So was that one?
There was a question about free will and being genetic.
Yes. Yes, you're essentially saying that it's genetically determined, you mean? That action is genetically determined.
All emotions are molecular.
Well,
in other words,
molecules play a large part in
expressions
generating them.
of the brain, the genetic makeup of your brain. It also identifies in some ways with mental illnesses, where there may be an over or under expression of a certain gene in your brain. And so you can alter that chemically. Indeed, as the gentleman behind you is suggesting the use of drugs. Again, a chemical to alter things.
Certainly. I mean, most certainly you can. And also environmental influences also alter the chemistry in a slightly more indirect way, but still physically. So
what pleases you most? There may be a selection of things that would please you most, actually, in respect to your free will response.
Sort of quasi-free will.
I'm with you.
Yes.
Just very quickly, when it comes to the causal origin of human actions and decisions, I think to a large extent we're in the land of the hand-waving. It's clear and plausible to suppose that there are lots of causal influences on our decisions and actions. But as Elizabeth Anscombe rightly pointed out in the early 1970s, the famous inaugural lecture at Cambridge, and we should be reminded ever since, there's all the difference in the world between a cause and a determining cause. You know, plenty of causes that are probabilistic that merely raise the chances of their effect without determining its currents. And we simply have no reason to exclude much of the causation behind our decisions and actions being no more than probabilistic. With mental illness, one of the really interesting questions about how to conceptualise mental illness is actually in relation to the theory of rationality. And I didn't really realise what a big problem this was until I was giving a talk at the Worsley Institute, and in Bar afterwards we talked about mental illness. As a good philosopher educated in the 1980s in the school of Davidson, as some people here might have heard, I always assumed that mental illness is a sort of failure of rationality. And of course what people at the Worsley Institute told me is that this has nothing to do with it. When someone comes to the Worsley Institute to be detected as having a mental illness or not, they don't work out how rational they are, because there are plenty of irrational colleagues they have, and they're in public who they aren't going to sort of throw away. They actually work out whether someone is mentally ill in a way that they said they couldn't describe to me, which I thought was deeply interesting. You just tell that someone is not a well person mentally. But it's very hard to explain in general terms what that involves. And it's not the same as being irrational. Genes, I think Bishop Butler in the 18th century should have put paid for good to the idea that free action is all about pleasure and fulfilling one's own desires. It might be true that all our actions are motivated by our desires, but that the contents of those desires need to have nothing to do with pleasure or our own good, or satisfying our own desires. Joseph Butler said it, we should believe it.
Okay, I think those would probably be adequately dealt with, but I would like to say something about this question about arbitrariness and arbitrary decisions and so on, because I actually think, the idea that can we make arbitrary decisions as telling us something about free will is deeply mistaken, because actually the free will bit is the non-arbitrary bit. It's actually the bit about making rational choices, about thinking stuff through. That's when you exercise your will. Sometimes you make a mad decision just at a moment when you haven't thought something through. Then you're not really exercising your will. You're letting your unconscious brain do the work. You're not letting your rationality do the work. So I'd actually draw a very strong distinction between arbitrariness and free will. It's actually the bits that are determined by our genetics and by our experiences and by what we've read and all these things that actually create the free will. That's where our choices come from, our decisions come from. And just finally, because obviously we want to wrap up, I think history is really important, and I think politics is really important. We're talking about what's the nature of being human. I do think, I said it in my introduction, but just to reiterate it, we are social beings. We create politics, we make history. So to try and understand what it is to be human without taking account of those things, I still think is deeply mistaken.
Right. I'm sure everybody will join with me in thanking our speakers for fielding a wide number of questions and for some fascinating discussion of this topic.